Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling drained, but couldn't explain why? As if you agreed to something you never wanted, or trusted someone who left you doubting yourself. That quiet discomfort you feel, it's not confusion, it's the signal that something deeper is happening. The most powerful form of manipulation isn't loud. It doesn't force, it guides, silently, skillfully. And the danger lies in how natural it feels, like the choices were yours, like the guilt is yours, like the silence means peace. But behind that illusion, there is influence, from those closest to you, from the world around you, from the unspoken rules you were taught never to question. In this video, we won't chase shadows. We'll expose the subtle patterns that control your thoughts, your decisions, your sense of self. You'll learn to recognize them, to interrupt them, to reclaim the stillness and strength that belong to you. This isn't about blame. It's about clarity. And once you begin to see, you won't be able to unsee. So stay with me, because what we uncover here may not be easy, but it will be the beginning of your freedom. Number 1, how to see the game before it plays you. There are people in this world who never raise their voice, never argue, never demand, but somehow they always get what they want. They don't ask for favors outright. They don't twist your arm. They simply plant seeds, quietly, precisely, and watch you water them with your own hands. You might think you're making a free choice. You're not. You've been nudged, not by force, but by calculation. And make no mistake, this is not charm. This is control in its most refined form, and it begins long before a word is ever spoken. The Stoics warned us about this long ago. They didn't speak of manipulation as a tool of the powerful, like some strategist obsessed with control. They spoke of clarity, the kind that sees through appearances, because to them, freedom was not about overpowering others. It was about never being a puppet, not even subtly. Here's how the game is played. First, they observe. Not with admiration, but with intent. They watch your face when you speak, listen for the tremor in your voice, study your pauses. They notice when you need to be liked, when you're afraid of being disliked, when your yes comes too quickly, even though your gut was screaming no. That's when they strike. Not through confrontation, but suggestion. They present their desires as your duty. They place their burdens on your conscience, and you, unaware, start to carry them. Sometimes they flatter. They praise your sensitivity, your kindness, your selflessness. They make you feel like the only person who truly understands them. And in return, you feel compelled to support them, to sacrifice, to give more than you should. But what you don't see is that they've written the script, and you're reading the lines they prepared. Others don't charm, they guilt. They speak in sighs, not demands. I just feel so alone, they say. You're the only one who cares. And suddenly, without asking, you've become their caretaker. Not because it was right, but because it was easier than dealing with the weight of their disappointment. You say yes, not because you want to, but because you're afraid of what will follow if you don't. Then there are those who whisper warnings, cloaked in concern. If you leave, you'll regret it. You'll never find someone who understands you like I do. They don't imprison you with chains. They bind you with fears they helped create. And you stay, not because you believe in the relationship, but because you doubt your ability to walk away. That's not love. That's surrender dressed as safety. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't see these dynamics as clever strategies to master. They saw them as threats to your autonomy. Seneca once said, He who is brave is free. But freedom, in this case, is not found in fighting back with anger. It's found in seeing clearly, to recognize when your choices are no longer your own, when your virtue is being bent by invisible hands. Manipulation thrives in the fog. Your job is to stand in the light. Let's be clear, the manipulator doesn't need to deceive you. They only need you to deceive yourself. The most dangerous form of control is the one that feels like kindness, the one that makes you feel needed, important, even noble. But ask yourself, is this a genuine connection or an emotional debt being collected in silence? I'll give you a simple example. Imagine a friend who always compliments you before asking for something. You're the most reliable person I know. I just don't trust anyone else with this. On the surface, it feels good. But look closer. Are you agreeing out of free will or out of expectation? That's the difference between a request and a manipulation. One honors your agency. The other exploits your desire to be seen a certain way. The Stoics would tell you, don't blame the manipulator. See them for what they are, but focus on your own mind. That's where your freedom begins. Do not let your desire to be liked, to avoid discomfort, or to feel needed override your judgment. If someone must distort your emotions to get what they want, they do not respect your soul. And if they do not respect your soul, they should not have access to your life. At the end of the day, the question isn't, how can I stop manipulators? The question is, what within me do they see as usable? As long as your sense of worth depends on the approval of others, you will be vulnerable to anyone who knows how to offer just enough affection to steer your will. So, begin there. Examine your fears, your need for validation, your patterns of over-accommodation. Because once you understand where the cracks are, you can begin to seal them. And when you do, manipulation stops, not because you've outwitted the game, but because you've stopped playing altogether. At the end of the day, no one can pull your strings if you've already let go of the need to dance. Number 2, what you don't see is what controls you. You're not manipulated because you're foolish. You're not manipulated because you're fragile. You're manipulated because you're human. Because every human being, no matter how intelligent or disciplined, carries within them quiet places, invisible gaps. These are not flaws. They are simply unattended spaces of the soul, the longing to be seen, the fear of abandonment, the guilt of self-preservation. And this is where the manipulator enters, not with aggression, but with precision. They don't overpower. They observe. They find what even you have refused to name. And then, like water finding a crack in stone, they flow through your blind spots and settle where your clarity hasn't yet reached. For some, that blind spot is the hunger for approval. Maybe it started in childhood, when affection came with conditions. Be good, and we'll love you. So you learned that love must be earned, not given. You started shaping yourself to fit the expectations of others, believing that to be accepted was to be worthy. Then, one day, someone appears. They see your need before you speak it. They give you just enough validation to keep you close. A kind word here, a flattering comment there, and suddenly you're handing over your choices, your time, your energy, not because they demanded it, but because they fed your invisible need. That's not loyalty. That's debt disguised as love. Others are manipulated through guilt, not guilt for wrongdoing, but guilt for simply choosing themselves. They were taught that saying no is selfish, that boundaries are cruel, that prioritizing one's peace is somehow a betrayal. And so they begin to fold inward. They silence their discomfort. They ignore their own inner compass. And the manipulator, so skilled at cloaking control in kindness, steps in and whispers, "I just want what's best for you." You believe it. But beneath their concern is a subtle pressure to comply, to please, to surrender. This is not care. It's a leash wrapped in good intentions. And then there is fear, the most ancient of all traps. The fear of being alone, the fear of being left behind, the fear of disappearing without meaning. This fear makes people cling to the wrong hands just to avoid the silence. The manipulator recognizes this too. They offer you a sense of belonging, not authentic connection, but attachment. They make you feel that without them, you are nothing. They don't have to say it outright. The fear already did. They just echo it back to you in a softer voice. None of these gaps appear by accident. They are the echoes of unexamined experience. Moments in our past when we surrendered too much, trusted too blindly, or weren't given space to form a healthy sense of self. But here's the hard truth. Until you become aware of your own openings, you will keep attracting those who know how to walk through them. Manipulators don't break down walls. They wait for the doors you left unlocked. There's a story that comes to mind, simple but real. A woman named Elise had always prided herself on being kind, generous, and easy to get along with. She never said no. She never made anyone uncomfortable. She was loved by many, but respected by few. One day, a new friend came into her life, charming, grateful, always complimenting her. Elise felt appreciated for the first time in years, but soon the requests began. "Can you help me with this? Would you mind covering that?" And she always said yes, even when she wanted to say no. Until one day she realized this wasn't a friendship. It was a quiet invasion. Her kindness had become a currency. And it wasn't until she looked within, really looked, that she saw the blind spot. The belief that saying no would make her unlovable. From that moment, she began sealing the gap, not with anger, but with clarity. This is what the Stoics meant by inner discipline. To live freely, you must first master yourself, not through denial of your emotions, but through understanding them. The manipulator doesn't control your mind. They only exploit what you haven't yet claimed. Their power is not in their cleverness, it's in your hesitation to see. So if you've ever asked, "Why do I keep falling into the same pattern?" the answer is not out there, it's within. Look at what you fear to lose. Look at where you crave approval. Look at where you silence your voice to be accepted. That is the place where someone will come, not to hurt you, but to use you. But there is a way out. You don't need to become cold or hard. You just need to become whole. You need to study yourself the way the manipulator would, except with compassion, not exploitation. You need to close the gaps from the inside. That's where freedom begins. When you no longer hunger for validation, when guilt no longer governs your choices, when fear no longer dictates your loyalties, that's when no one can use you. At the end of the day, real power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from no longer being controlled, especially by what you refuse to face within yourself. Number 3, train your mind, not your reactions. Everyone wants to stop being manipulated, but few are willing to face what it really takes. Not advice, not tactics, but something far more demanding. Clarity so sharp it hurts. Because the truth does set you free, but only after it breaks through your favorite illusions. And the first illusion we must abandon is the belief that being kind, compassionate, and understanding protects us. It doesn't. In fact, these beautiful qualities, when unguarded by discernment, make us vulnerable. Manipulators don't prey on cruelty. They prey on softness that has not yet learned to protect itself. Emotional immunity isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming conscious. It's the art of remaining still in the face of emotional bait. It's training yourself not to react just because someone pulls a familiar string. And the first step, brutal self-honesty. What makes you fold? Is it the fear of disappointing someone, the discomfort of being misunderstood, the unbearable tension of saying no? These reactions aren't random. They're rehearsed habits born from years of self-preservation. But if you don't slow down and observe them, they'll keep running your life, and manipulators will keep using them like a script. I remember a friend named Claire. She had a gift for reading people and using what she saw to steer them subtly. With me, she always knew how to frame things just right. If she needed a favor, she'd say, "You're always so generous, unlike most people." And I'd smile, not realizing that I was being rewarded in advance for agreeing. One day, I paused. I didn't respond. I simply sat with her words. And in that silence, the spell broke. I realized she wasn't complimenting me. She was steering me. That moment of awareness was everything. I still care about her. But now, I respond with clarity, not compulsion. That's the second layer of emotional immunity, stillness before response. It means not letting flattery soften your judgment. It means hearing a guilt-tripped sentence and asking yourself, is this truth or control disguised as care? It means practicing the habit of pausing, because the manipulator doesn't want your logic. They want your urgency. They don't need to overpower you if they can simply get you to react without thinking. The third step is to disrupt your patterns. Manipulators survive on prediction. They study how you respond. If you always explain yourself when challenged, they'll corner you with subtle accusations. If you always reassure when someone plays the victim, they'll cry on cue. So stop being predictable. Say no when a yes is expected. Withdraw when they expect protest. Stay calm when they provoke. When your behavior becomes unfamiliar, the script they've written no longer works, and they are forced to reveal whether their intentions were ever genuine. But perhaps the most important foundation of all is this: build an unshakable sense of who you are. Because the manipulator doesn't just work to influence your decisions, they work to rewrite your identity. They want you doubting, justifying, questioning yourself, until your sense of self is shaped more by their narrative than your own. But when you're anchored in who you are, external opinions lose their grip. You don't need to over-explain. You don't need to win their approval. You simply see the move and step aside. That is power. And it doesn't shout. It simply refuses to bend. Remember, emotional immunity is not a theory. It's a practice. You don't build it by watching a video or reading a quote. You build it by facing your need to be liked and not obeying it. You build it by noticing when you're triggered and doing nothing until your reason catches up. It's the daily, quiet work of not betraying yourself for the comfort of others. And in a world that rewards emotional chaos, that kind of inner clarity is rare and deeply respected. At the end of the day, you don't have to be ruthless to stop being used. You just have to stop being available to every hand that pulls a string you haven't cut. That's not cold. That's what the Stoics called wisdom, choosing clarity over compulsion, reason over reaction, and freedom over flattery. Number 4, when love becomes control. It's easy to spot manipulation when it comes from a stranger, a pushy salesman, a cunning co-worker. You see it for what it is and walk away. But what happens when the manipulator is someone you love? a parent who raised you, a partner who shares your bed, a friend you've known since childhood. That's where it gets harder, because in close relationships, manipulation doesn't wear a mask of threat. It wears the face of affection. It speaks the language of loyalty, and instead of pushing you, it pulls you, softly, slowly, and deeply, until you're no longer sure where their needs end and your boundaries begin. The manipulator who knows you intimately doesn't need to shout. They whisper. They don't block your choices outright. They make you question whether you're even allowed to choose differently. It's not, "You can't do this." It's, "How could you do this to me?" They don't take your freedom. They make you hand it over. Not through fear, but through guilt. Not through force, but through love misused. Imagine this. A daughter dreams of studying abroad. Her father says, "After everything we've done for you, you'd really leave us like this?" She stays, not because it's what she wants, but because the guilt wrapped itself around her decision like a rope. Or take David, a man in a relationship with someone who constantly says, "I only act this way because I love you so much." And he believes it. Even as his identity shrinks, his choices narrow, and his confidence fades, he stays, thinking this erosion of self is what devotion looks like. This is how the emotional trap is set. Not with chains, but with expectations. With gratitude that feels like a debt. With love that sounds more like obligation than freedom. In families, it often hides behind the word respect. In the workplace, it's disguised as loyalty. In romance, it's cloaked in care. But when any of these virtues are enforced through guilt, silence, or fear, they cease to be virtues. They become tools of control. And here's the hard truth many never dare to face. Not every person who loves you knows how to love you well. Not every bond that holds you is meant to protect you. Some just exist to keep you from outgrowing the cage you didn't even know you were in. So how do you reclaim yourself? Start by setting boundaries, clear, calm, and unapologetic. A quiet no that requires no defense is often more powerful than any long explanation. Then comes truth-telling, not to change the other person, but to affirm what you now see. This doesn't feel respectful. I won't allow this anymore. You speak not to convince, but to honor your clarity. And then, the hardest part, hold the line, because they will test it, with tears, with silence, with accusations. The manipulator doesn't lose control quietly. They rely on your discomfort, your hesitation, your old reflex to make peace, to explain, to stay. But if you remain rooted, if you choose your self-respect over emotional familiarity, you break the pattern, you shatter the dance. Sometimes the most loving act is to walk away, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. To give both yourself and the other person a chance to face their emptiness without leaning on you to avoid it. Because as long as you keep absorbing their chaos, they have no reason to change, and you have no room to grow. True love honors freedom. It doesn't guilt. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't shrink you to make itself more comfortable. The Stoics would say that real affection is never possessive. It respects the other's path, even when that path means walking away. And only by stepping out of these tangled bonds can you begin to see clearly again, to recognize what's real, what's rooted in virtue, and what was merely a performance dressed in care. At the end of the day, it's not the depth of the connection that defines its worth. It's the freedom within it. Because any love that costs you your peace, your clarity, or your integrity was never truly love to begin with. Number 5. See clearly, move strategically. Let's face it, modern life is a battlefield of influence. You're being targeted not with weapons, but with narratives. Social media sells you ideals, news cycles guide your emotions, relationships ask you to prove love through sacrifice, and even your workplace demands loyalty disguised as gratitude. The dangerous part? Most people walk into this war unarmed, led by emotion, reacting instead of observing, offering their peace in exchange for approval. If you don't want to be manipulated, you need to stop playing life as if it's simple. It's not. But it doesn't mean you become cynical. It means you become precise. The Stoics believed in one thing above all: self-mastery. And that's exactly what strategic clarity is. Not cold-heartedness, but deep emotional discipline. You see, manipulators rely on your emotional impulsiveness. They need you to be predictable, to overshare, to panic when your image is threatened. But when you think before you act, when you slow down, when you learn to respond with intent instead of instinct, you change the entire game. Start with observation. The Stoics always asked, "What is in my control?" And the first thing is your perception. Don't judge people by what they claim. Judge them by what they repeat. Their habits, their patterns, their silences, their timing. A person's true character isn't revealed when they make a promise. It's revealed when no one's watching and they think they owe you nothing. Study that. Not to condemn, but to understand. You're not here to play detective. You're here to stay awake. Then practice silence. Not as withdrawal, but as strategy. One of the greatest weaknesses in any manipulative dynamic is your own need to explain, to prove, to justify. You don't owe anyone your vulnerability. You owe yourself stability. When you resist the urge to overshare or react emotionally, you disrupt the script that others are trying to hand you. They don't know where you stand, and that makes them hesitate. That pause, that hesitation, is where you reclaim control. I once knew a man named Ethan. Sharp, likable, always in control. Until a colleague started subtly undermining him in meetings. At first, Ethan tried to defend himself, explained his decisions, justified his ideas. But the more he spoke, the more power he gave away. Then something shifted. He started responding only when necessary. He stayed calm, let silence hang in the air. And suddenly, the undermining stopped. Not because the aggressor changed, but because Ethan stopped feeding the fire. His silence made him unshakable. That's the power of ambiguity. You don't have to show all your cards to prove you're honest. The Stoics taught that a person's strength lies in restraint. You adapt your language, your presence, your energy depending on where you are, without ever betraying who you are. The world doesn't need full access to your thoughts to understand your integrity. You simply show what is required and keep the rest guarded. Power isn't in what you reveal. It's in what you can withhold with grace. And finally, take ownership of your emotional center. A manipulator survives by feeding on your instability, your need for validation, your sensitivity to approval, your fear of being misunderstood. But when you anchor your worth in virtue, not opinion, not applause, you become immovable. Your peace becomes non-negotiable, and no external pressure, no calculated guilt, no cleverly disguised threat can shake what is built on self-command. This is not about playing games. It's about refusing to be a piece on someone else's board. The Stoic path isn't about dominating others. It's about never allowing others to dominate you through your own blind spots. You regulate your emotions, stay grounded in reason, and rise above the chaos, not because you're heartless, but because your peace is sacred. At the end of the day, true strength isn't in controlling the world. It's in mastering yourself so thoroughly that no one else ever gets the chance. Number 6, taking control of your mind. There is a truth most people avoid because it demands too much responsibility. If you do not take full control of your mind, someone else will. And no, it won't always look like manipulation. It won't come from a villain in a dark cloak. Often, it comes with a smile, a familiar voice, a cultural norm. Sometimes it's a parent's phrase you've repeated your whole life. Sometimes it's the invisible expectation to comply, to be agreeable, to keep the peace even when your soul is screaming for space. The deepest form of manipulation isn't in what others say, it's in what we never learned to question. Your mind, if left unguarded, becomes a house others quietly rearrange while you're asleep. Beliefs handed to you, emotions you assume are facts, choices that feel like yours but are actually crafted from fear, guilt, or the desire to belong. And the Stoics knew this well. The first step toward freedom is not outer rebellion, it is inner clarity. You must stop calling conditioning free will. You must separate what you want from what you've been taught to want. But that freedom comes with a price. You'll need to tear down the comfortable lies, the belief that everyone means well, the idea that goodness requires self-erasure, that silence is always noble. Real clarity forces you to say things people won't applaud. It requires you to endure the silence after a boundary, to walk away from people you once built your identity around. That's not cruelty. That's strength without disguise. Think of Maya, a teacher who always said yes, to overtime, to unpaid tasks, to being the emotional dumping ground of others. She believed that kindness meant saying yes, always. But one day, she paused. She said no. The reaction was swift: coldness, guilt trips, withdrawal. But for the first time, Maya didn't flinch. She stood still. And in that moment, she realized something powerful. It wasn't her kindness they loved. It was her compliance. And she owed them neither. You stop being manipulated the day you realize you don't need to be approved of to be at peace. When the fear of disappointing others no longer guides your decisions. When you no longer abandon your values for the comfort of fitting in. And most of all, when you can look someone in the eye, someone who used to hold power over you, and calmly say, "No more." At the end of the day, your freedom doesn't begin when others let go of control. It begins the moment you stop giving it to them. Now that you've seen the mechanics of manipulation, the real question is, what will you do with it? You can scroll away, return to your life, and let these ideas fade like a passing thought. You can convince yourself that you're not being influenced, that your decisions are always your own, and that your silence is strength. But deep down, you know better. The game doesn't stop just because you stop looking. The pull doesn't disappear just because you pretend it's not there. Or you can begin something different. You can start now, by watching with sharper eyes, by pausing before reacting, by choosing to rebuild your inner world, not on guilt, fear, or the need to please, but on clarity, integrity, and quiet strength. The kind of strength that doesn't need to prove itself because it refuses to be owned. The truth is, most people don't see they're being played until the damage is done. But you're here, and that means you've already started to wake up. From this point forward, every time you hesitate to speak, every time you feel guilt that doesn't belong to you, you'll notice. And in that noticing, you'll gain power. Because real transformation doesn't begin with shouting. It begins in silence, with awareness, with choice. So I ask you, was there a moment in your life when you realized something wasn't right? When you felt used, controlled, unseen? Comment below with, I saw it. Let that be your first act of clarity. You might inspire someone else to recognize their own turning point. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe for more. What comes next isn't comfort, it's freedom, and it begins with the next step. Stay with me.